Coming up, millions in the U.S. are voting in the midterm elections. Polls are starting to close in certain states. Will there be a shift in U.S. Congress? How will the results affect South Korea? A special investigation team raided the office of the National Police Chief, among others. Parts of the efforts to get to the bottom of the tragic Itaewon crowd crush. Plus, as global delegates carry out their climate talks at COP27, a report says that developing countries will need some $2 trillion annually by the end of the decade to help cope with cutting emissions and dealing with the impact of climate change. Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. We begin as the first polls are closing in the U.S., where Americans are voting on who will take control of Congress. Up for grabs in the 2022 midterm elections are all the seats in the House of Representatives and about a third of them in the Senate. We have our Choi Min-jung on the line with the latest. Min-jung.
Right, Doyeon, it's a very big day for the United States. Voters across the country headed to the polls on Tuesday to cast ballots in the midterm elections, which decide who controls the U.S. Congress. This year, all 435 seats in the House of Representatives and 35 of the 100 Senate seats are being contested, and 36 states will be electing their governors. More than 45 million people have cast their ballots in pre-election voting, and millions more are expected to turn out to vote as well.
Now, Min-jung, how is the election likely to go, and what are some of the key races?
Well, it is a tight race. The Democrats held the majority in both the House and Senate for the past 2 years, but they do so only by a very narrow margin. Now, the Democrats need at least 50 seats to keep control of the Senate, while the Republicans need 51 to take control. Election forecasts do show that the Republicans are slightly favored to win more seats. But because it's a tight contest, we will have to wait and see what the turnout will be in key battlegrounds like Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And as for the House of Representatives, a party must hold 218 out of 435 seats to take control. Although it varies by source, projections show the Republicans to win the House by around 10 seats. But yet again, we will have to wait until Tuesday evening for clearer results.
That's right, and we will keep a close watch on that. Now, Min-jung, how will the outcome of the elections impact the remaining 2 years of Biden's presidency?
Right, the results could have a profound impact on Biden's final 2 years of presidency. If the Democrats are able to maintain their majority, then Biden will be able to continue with his plans on climate change, expanding healthcare programs, protecting abortion rights, and tightening gun control. But things won't be so easy for Biden if the Republicans take control of even one of the chambers. And we should also note that the midterms could give us a clue about the presidential candidates for 2024. This is all I have for now, but I'll be back with more updates on our next newscast. Tuyan.
Thank you for the report, Min-jung. Now, South Korea and the U.S. discussed the impact of Washington's restrictions on semiconductor exports to China, as well as ways to resolve uncertainties in the industry. Seoul's Deputy Minister for Trade and Investment met with the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Export Administration. This session follows the two countries' supply chain and commercial dialogue launched in May. During Tuesday's talks, Moon Dong-min urges Thea Candler to help ease uncertainties that could occur to South Korean chip giants in China once the one-year exemption from the measure ends. The two sides reportedly agreed to hold working group talks on export restrictions on a regular basis. Washington has decided to impose fresh sanctions on 2 individuals for aiding the development of North Korea's weapons program. The U.S. Treasury Department said in a press release Tuesday that the two are affiliated with Air Koryo, the North's national airline, and were involved in the transportation of electric parts from China to North Korea on behalf of the regime's rocket industry. It also added that Air Koryo is controlled by and integrated into the North's military. In addition, Tornado Cash, a cryptocurrency mixer service, was also blacklisted for helping North Korean hackers raise money for the regime's weapons development. Now, a team investigating the Itaewon crowd crush raided the office of the police chief. 55 agencies and offices are being searched for evidence. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo admitted the government failed to be there when the tragedy occurred. Our Lee Kyung-eun brings the updates.
The investigations into the deadly Itaewon crowd crush are expanding further in scope. Under scrutiny are the police agencies, including the Yongsan, Seoul, and national agencies. Also the fire service, both the Yongsan Fire Station and the city headquarters. The administrators of Yongsan-gu District, the Seoul Metro in charge of the Itaewon subway station. And as of Tuesday, the list of agencies and offices that are being raided has risen from 8 to 55 in less than a week. Among them is the office of the nation's police chief, Yoon Hee-gun. Yoon is accused of failing to put together a crowd control plan for Halloween, which is notoriously crowded in Itaewon, and of failing to respond in a timely manner. The investigators are trying to secure cell phones, witnesses, documents, surveillance footage, and computer data. The probe is picking up pace with the latest findings suggesting it was negligence by senior police that resulted in major cracks in safety system, something President Yoon Suk-yeol harshly criticized the day before. There are also growing calls for justice from the public, with thousands holding candlelight vigils over the weekend, many of whom were young people about the same age as the victims, as well as liberal activists. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo at the National Assembly was asked about these demonstrations and expressed empathy.
The nation's youth are now asking the government to take responsibility. They say there was no government there. What are your thoughts?
It's now been shown that there were shortcomings among those in charge of public security in Yongsan where these gatherings were taking place on the day of the incident. So it's correct to say there was no government.
The head of the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission also told lawmakers that any reports of harm to the public interest from the inadequate police response will result in an investigation by the organization. The remarks are in line with the position of the ruling People Power Party that's largely seeking to hold the police accountable. But opposition Democratic Party insists that investigations should expand further to include the current government. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Now, as we have seen, a special investigation is underway to determine the cause of the Itaewon crowd crush tragedy. Without any delay, let's connect with Professor Song Se-ryun at Kyunghee University's Law School to find out more. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Now, first, could you explain the idea behind the Special Investigative Unit? Under what authority are the police able to do this, and how much power does this team have?
Well, initially, the investigation team was placed under Seoul Metropolitan Police because it happened in Seoul. But as the inquiry went into the failure of processes and possible negligence of Seoul police personnel themselves, the National Office of Investigation took over and put together a special investigative unit. Now, if you remember, National Office of Investigation is a relatively new agency that was created under the prosecutorial reform that amended the Police Act last year. The idea is to separate the power investigation from the prosecutor's office and also create a Korean version of the FBI, highly capable and professional investigative capacity within the police. Now, they have the power to pull together resources on national level and can probe into the rank and files of the Seoul office. But I got to point out that the controversy still remains because still the police is investigating into themselves, the actions of police. So that's why the opposition party in the National Assembly are calling for the independent prosecutor. But then the twist is that the critics say that this is exactly the situation where prosecutor's office should be deeply involved, but the aforementioned amendment removed the prosecutor's power to investigate mass disasters.
Right. Now, focusing on what's going on at the moment, could you walk us through the focus of the investigation? We saw the unit executing search and seizures in a number of different places. What are they actually looking for?
Well, they're looking for what went wrong, but specifically, they're looking into why and who ignored the early warnings, why the chain of command they were reporting was disrupted, whether those who were in charge committed any dereliction of duty. They also look into allegations that some reports are deleted and possibly there was some cover-up efforts. So they are looking into far and wide to see who are responsible and exactly what happened. Now, I think that one of the concern is that it seems like they're looking to people to blame, but I would like to see going forward more about what kind of better system can be put together and what kind of systematic failure or weak point were existing at the time.
Now, I want to talk about the timeline. Investigations of this scale will always kind of take longer than usual, and because it is a sensitive matter. How long do you think it will take for the investigations to finish and for indictments, if there are going to be any, to be made?
Right. They have the massive team at this point. I think it's up to 514 team under the investigative unit. How long does it take? Well, as long as it takes. But given that what happened in Itaewon was well witnessed and failures are pretty well documented, and we're not talking about the apprehending any fugitives, so I don't think it'll take a very long time, maybe a matter of a month or two. But once it finishes, the investigation is turned over to the prosecutor's office. I'm pretty sure that that the prosecutor's office will come up with a list of supplementary investigations. So the investigation will not be over when the investigative units initially conclude the investigation. I think that there will be indictments. I think there would be some charges. But I hope this is the part of the process that builds a very, very robust safety measures and safety governance in Korea.
Well, Professor, one more thing before you go. In a short term, you've mentioned how this is one of the first National Investigative Unit items that's probably a big incident. So this would be a big test to the separation of investigation and indictment for this country.
Exactly right. The existence of highly special investigative unit within the police was the kind of a premise that the opposition party was going for in the reform efforts. So whether they will do a good job will also foretell what kind of political battle they'll go through in terms of prosecutorial reform and whether that will be a success or there will be further controversial debates coming our way in the future. So it is a very important litmus test for the NOI.
Well, thank you so much for your insights, Professor, and I hope you have a great morning.
My pleasure, you too.
Now, as global delegates continue with climate talks at COP27, a report says that some $2 trillion per year will be needed by the end of the decade to help developing countries cut carbon emissions and deal with the effects of climate hazards. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more.
As the world continues to witness climate hazards, experts estimate that around $2 trillion will be needed annually by 2030 to help developing countries cope with the effects of climate change. Citing a report jointly commissioned by the governments of Britain and Egypt, The Guardian reported Tuesday that would be the cost of helping poor nations switch away from fossil fuels and invest in renewable energy as well as other low-carbon technology. The report, which was presented at the U.S. COP27 Climate Summit, also explains that the costs needed to cover the needs stemming from all of the world's developing countries exceed any past climate financial aid designed to help poor countries. The report also elaborated that around half of the required financing can come from local sources, including bolstering domestic public finance and capital markets. However, it emphasized that external finance coming from the World Bank as well as other global institutions must also play a key role. It added that current investment stands at only around $500 million. As part of the external financing, the report called for developing countries to work closely with investors, development banks, and rich countries to secure $1 trillion a year by the end of the decade. The issue is likely to be on the agenda as talks continue in Egypt on Wednesday. Kim Hye-san, Arirang News.
SSG Landers are the new Korean baseball organization champions, beating Kiwoom Heroes after 6 games of the best-of-7 Korean series on Tuesday. The Landers now became the first team ever to win the series after also maintaining first place in the league for the entire season. The team is led by Chu Shin-soo, a 16-year Major League veteran who joined them as the team was acquired by Shinsegae Group in 2021. 40-year-old backup outfielder Kim Kang-min was voted MVP for the series as he batted .348 with 2 home runs and 5 RBIs without starting a game. Most importantly, Kim helped the team win Game 5 after a 3-run home run at the bottom of 9th on Monday night. Among OECD members, the fastest aging one is South Korea. By 2025, the country is expected to become a super-aged society. Our Shin Ye-eun shed light on the preparations being made in the nation to accommodate this group.
In less than 3 years, South Korea will become a super-aged society. That's when 20% of the population are aged 65 and above. It's the inevitable consequence of low birth rates and longer life expectancy. With more people retiring and seeking out their second life, silver is becoming the new gold. And the country is trying to catch up with new demands. For the wealthy, everything they need is available at the country's top-tier retirement homes, dubbed Silvertowns. To live in these Silvertowns, you or your spouse has to be at least 60 years old. You also have to pay a deposit of around $300,000 to $600,000 US, as well as at least $2,000 a month in rent and maintenance fees. I visited one of the most popular choices for seniors, a Silvertown located in the center of Seoul. Here, you can enjoy the advantages of living in the capital.
With longer life expectancy, seniors nowadays work even after their retirement age. Many value socializing. That's why many of our residents choose us. There are so many public transport options nearby. Everything they need is on their doorstep, like hospitals, movie theaters, and parks.
There are even more services waiting for people who don't want to go out. In case residents have any health problems, a personal nurse is on standby 24/7. Residents can also take courses run by renowned professionals in the field. Just like a hotel, there's regular housekeeping and buffet meals. There are also many cultural classes and different communities for seniors to try out new hobbies and socialize.
I started taking model walking lessons from last year. At first, I came for rehabilitation. I had a back injury. Now I feel great. My kids joke that I have better posture than them. I also look forward to coming to class to meet my new friends here.
These luxury retirement homes might seem to have everything seniors need, but for many, they're out of reach. As of 2020, only 0.1% of seniors could afford to live in places like these. That's why a challenge for the government is to improve the quality of life for the remaining South Korean elderly. Shin Ye-eun, Arirang News.
Now for a look at the news from around the world, we turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning, Do-yeon.
Let's start in the UK, where just a month into new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's time in office, one of his ministers has resigned following allegations of bullying.
Well, that is right, Do-yeon. In a letter released on Monday, Sir Gavin Williamson stepped down from his position as the UK government's Cabinet Office Minister. Now, the resignation comes after messages surfaced that show the 46-year-old sending berating messages to a former chief whip for not ensuring his attendance at the funeral of Queen Elizabeth in September. Now, the texts allege that places at the funeral were rigged and politically motivated. Further accusations by a former senior civil servant on Monday allege that Mr. Williamson had made threats of physical violence. Downing Street has said it's looking into establishing the facts about these comments. Now, Tesla has issued a software update covering some 40,000 vehicles over a possible loss of power steering. According to a recall filing with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the power steering assist system in some of the 2017 to 2021 Model S and Model X vehicles could be affected by potholes or rough terrain. So far, no deaths or injuries related to the problem have been reported. Tesla says the issue has been fixed remotely through a software update in about 97% of affected EVs. This comes just over a month after more than 1 million Tesla cars were recalled due to a Windows system malfunction. This was solved by a similar software patch. Moving over to Italy, where archaeologists announced on Tuesday the discovery of 24 ancient bronze statues. Now, the figures were found at a dig site in the sacred baths of the San Casciano dei Bagni near Siena. These statues were well preserved by layers of mud and were found alongside smaller bronze statuettes and almost 6,000 coins. Dating back almost 2,000 years, past 100 BC, the sensational find could help historians to piece together how the Tuscany region became part of the Roman Empire. Now, the find is the most significant in Italy since 1972, when the famed Riace Greek bronze warriors were discovered undersea. And finally, stargazers on Tuesday saw a rare blood moon. A result of a full lunar eclipse, the phenomenon won't make another appearance for 3 more years. It was viewable only to some in certain regions in North and Central America, the Pacific, Asia, and Australia and New Zealand. Now, the red hue is an effect brought about as the moon passes through Earth's shadow when it is positioned between the moon and the sun. The next full lunar eclipse is set to take place on March 14th in 2025.
Good morning, I'm Lee Ji-yeon with the latest weather updates. Late autumn weather continues with readings hovering above normal temperatures. Bright sunshine is anticipated for much of the day in most areas, except in the capital region and Chungcheongdo provinces with high levels of fine dust covering those areas. Right now, the western parts of the country are covered with dense fog and will have foggy conditions for much of the morning hours, so please drive carefully. But dust-free regions will have typical late autumn weather. Afternoon highs will be similar to slightly lower than yesterday's, Seoul going up to 17 degrees Celsius, Daegu topping out at 20 degrees this afternoon. A dry advisory in Busan and Ulsan has been lifted, but east of Gangwon province remains under a dry advisory. The much-needed rain is in the forecast this weekend, while gaps in readings between lows and highs will remain wide at this last stage of autumn. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
Now that wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for our Thursday's edition at the same time. Please stay with Arirang News though for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.
백섬에